I aspire to do what you talk about and make art on that scale.
But you do realize that you are, right? You do realize that you are both social sculptors in a way. You didn't hoard what you knew. And you couldn't hoard what you know because hoarding, being greedy with your wisdom and being greedy with your heart means that the community suffocates and starves to death. So you are operating on the grand scale of social sculpture, like you're creating a world that is a work of art.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I need to talk to you every day.
Want to go to Church of Vanessa.
For real.
Hey there. Welcome to the Geeks Talks Q&A podcast. I'm Emily Leach. I'm one part of the Geeks team, along with Ben Orozco and Helen Lee. All three of us are artists, learners, educators working in glass. Through our work with Geeks, we're interested in the power of storytelling to shift perspectives, connect people, and rethink possible futures. In addition to this podcast, Ben and I edit and produce the Geeks Talks lecture series, which, believe it or not, is now in its third season. Our format this year, Expanded Glass Histories, pairs glassy artists and researchers based on shared themes and impulses in their work. You've already met our guests for this episode on Kinship, Cedric Mitchell and Corey Pemberton, representing Better Together, in conversation with citizen artist Vanessa German. This conversation follows their respective Geeks Talks lectures from fall 2022. We received almost 80 questions from the audience, whittled them down to a list of roughly 14, and then shared them with the speakers as a framework for their discussion. Later on, I'll talk a little bit about how you, as a listener, can participate in these Q&As and support public scholarship in glass. Thanks to Wet Dog Glass and Pittsburgh Glass Center for sponsoring this episode. That's enough for me. Back to the conversation.
Hi, my name is Corey Pemberton.
Hi, my name is Cedric Mitchell.
Hi, my name is Vanessa German.
So, how did we meet? Cedric and I met probably about 7 years ago. Is that right, Ced?
Yeah, it's around that time, 2014.
It was at the 2014 gas conference in Chicago. We had each individually, without knowing that the other one existed, reached out to the same artist, Joe Cariotti, and expressed interest in assisting him with his demonstration or just sort of like being in his orbit in whatever way uh, he saw fit or possible. And he ended up responding to both of us and inviting us to help with his demonstration. So there we were, two black glassblowers from different parts of the country who had never really worked with another black glassblower. And now we're on the floor together in this big studio at this big conference where everybody's watching. And all of a sudden, this guy, Joe, he went from having no black assistants to two black assistants. We would eventually both go on to work for him. Said before myself went to relocate to Los Angeles, and I did the same a couple years later in 2019, and so we both ended up working for the same artist together. Vanessa and I have not formally met until just now. Just been very impressed with how thoughtful she is in her work and her life and her practice, and how engaged she is with people outside of herself and generous with her time and thoughts.
Like Corey was saying, we met at the gas conference in 2014, which was a very special and magical moment. Um, I introduced myself and he introduced himself and also told me that his dad was named Cedric. So I kind of felt like it was a special moment and more was to come, from that. Like it wouldn't be the last time we crossed paths and sort of like family now. So, we see each other a lot. We go on family trips and we work together. This is my first time formally meeting Vanessa as well, but I felt a connectivity with her from watching her talk. The most important thing that stood out to me was love being the healing component of everything, and the connectivity from from the community and then the people that she surrounds herself with. It just made me think about the woman who taught me how to blow glass, and she pulled me to the side one day and told me that I'm not here for myself, that I'm here for other people. So that was a real special thing to watch her talk.
I have been with you all in your video, which I've watched more than once. And I feel quite naturally into the spaces where people are engaging soulfully and lovingly in their own creative adventures and the way that they extend a space of spirit and loving forth from that place. So that's kind of how I read the world. And so watching you all, the first thing that came to me was the connection that you two have as human beings with one another, and how um, to be honest, how precious it is to bear witness to the caring, creative, intentional relationship between Black people, between two Black human beings, and then to see you extend that forward. So I recognize that there's a place of such deep dimensional connection between you two. So, what I celebrate is the love that you two have for each other, and how that love makes so much more of itself in the ways that you share what you love. And I think it's a really primal, original technology to love one another and then to share what you love, inviting then other human beings to expand in the adventures of their humanness. And so when I watch everything that you do, it's like watching the magic of replication, or like a Mandelbrot spiral, just watching it go and go and go and go forward. Because I also recognize that you all have touched so many people in ways that they are not able to actually give language for, but they continue on. Even the fact that some people are probably literally able to continue on in their life and their work because of experiences that you've invited them into. So I recognize how powerful it is, but I also recognized watching you too that you're artists individually. And I always wonder if people who start organizations and initiatives are able to protect the time and space of their own creative desire and adventures. And so I thought about that, and I thought about how, like, if what you've created has a succession plan so that you too can step away from it and continue adventuring on in the mystery and the wonder of your own work and allow what you've created to move forward. But I came in, it was really, it's quite a poetic thing to watch you two together and to watch you talk about what you created. And it's a thing of beauty.
That was beautiful.
So kind.
Yeah.
Too kind, perhaps.
Can you talk about what kinship means to you in your practice? You know, what kinship means to me is the connectivity and bringing all these different walks of life together. I mean, initially, that's what Better Together was started for, is us engaging in the community. You know, when we first did the first Better Together, it was in Los Angeles in El Segundo, and there's not very many, people of color around this area. And what we're trying to do is connect within the community and bring people into our space and share what we do with others. The most memorable moment was like watching this little black girl and this white girl help the guy make smoothies, who was a vendor, and then just to watch these kids play. And that was the moment right there where it's like that's what it's all about. You got these different walks of life coming together, and then being able to spread that in other communities as well. Like in New Orleans, when we went there, and want to figure out how we can connect with their culture and bring that into the space, what we were doing as well. Having DJ Jubilee, who was a well-known DJ and a culture figure in New Orleans, be there, and then connect with the community and go see a second line and embrace everything within the community and the culture, which helps us, with our practice and changing lives and things like that.
Yeah, kinship to me means family, it means bond, it means tight knittedness. And when I think about those words in relationship to my practice, I think about this sort of like instant family that you get through glass blowing, and that we get uh, as an even smaller community of Black glass artists. It's this sort of connection that people can't even understand if they're not in the club. It's like if you know type situation where, you know, glass blowing in particular is this process that is extremely difficult, but it's also accomplished through teamwork. And so we automatically have these bonds that form with people who we work alongside or who assist us, because we can't do what we do without them. And so the that bond that's formed, it's, I think, stronger than that of other craft media or artistic professions or professions in general. And then again, we've moved through these spaces where they are predominantly occupied by people who don't look like us. In our case, Cedric was one of the first, other Black glass blowers I met after I'd been blowing glass for damn near 4 years. And so it's this thing where you've already got that bond because you're glass makers, but now we've got this other shared experience of having been the only person in the room who looks like us in a media that is extremely difficult and takes a lot of time and dedication. And so, I mean, when I see, I'm like getting goosebumps just thinking about it, because when I see another Black person who makes glass or has makes artwork with glass and has dedicated some time and space to that, it's like your family. You don't even got to open your mouth. I already know we're family.
I think about kinship first in the hyper intimate, being kin with yourself. Especially, I experience a lot of, and have experienced my whole life, just a lot of disruption in this culture, separating me from myself, from my own ideas, from connecting with my own body, heart, mind, and spirit. And I feel like that's a function of white supremacist delusion and capitalism, to actually separate you from nature, separate you from yourself as nature, and to separate you um, into something that can be sort of like placed and consumed easily in a culture of this shape. So I'm experiencing my first deep relationships with kinship in just with myself, and giving myself permission to hear myself, to be in communication with my own heart and ideas and spirit, with my own agency and authority, like coming to a place where I'm a self-taught artist, and I had to enter into a place where I was sort of forced into a place where it was like a matter of life or death, that I had to be able to listen and be kin to my own self. And so that hyper intimate kinship of I think that all artists have, is this place where you're in relationship with your own ideas, and you're relating those ideas and connecting them to your history, to present themes. And so giving full permission to the deep intimate technology of listening to oneself, and then recognizing that that is in a lot of ways infectious. I love being in the room with Thurman.
Just for the listeners of this podcast, Thurman Statham to me is one of the OGs of American studio glass, and he happens to be Black, and so for us, he's a role model and someone who, yeah, you'll hear us talk about a lot.
Like, I really want to cuss to talk about this, but I recognize that children are being taught not to cuss as a way to express deep emotion. So I'm not going to do it. But there's a way that I watch Thurman enter into like really instinctive frequency. And so when I like watch him working and communicating to the team members and moving through the space, it's like watching a kind of sizzling miracle or something, because I'm watching him communicating on so many levels with himself and bringing that internal communication externally in a way that is so warm, because I've watched people move ideas from inside of themselves to outside of themselves. And sometimes it's harsh and they remove dignity from other people because it's like crunchy, but that's a personality thing. But I think about watching Thurman make such a warm space in the team and watching him actively in almost the instant of inspiration, like speak things out loud and watch people respond to it. Um, and that way of seeing that internal intimate kinship with his own self and his identity in the wholeness of himself as an artist, and then watching him like bring that into the kin of the team is something that is always really powerful to me about being in glass spaces, and especially being in glass spaces with people who are not refusing the spirit of the thing itself, right? And so for me, kinship is that intimate, deep, internal technology that's connected to your DNA, it's connected to memory, and it's connected to how you've been treated in other spaces. And then watching how that lives in the external shape of community and team. I feel like it is actually one of the truest and most profound gifts of being human, to be in kinship with ourselves and then to extend and to be nourished in the communal kinship.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I'm just thinking about what you said about Thurman too, and that uh,
Mm.
way that he is. And it's like he could be saying something that, somebody else might bark out and it would seem very nasty or um, some type of way. But when he says it, it's always with this undertone of inclusion. He's pulling you in, he's bringing you into the process and into, yeah, his little family.
He does do that. Like he gathers in more than one way, if I could say. Like he is gathering people around him. Can I tell y'all a Thurman story?
Yeah.
Please, yeah.
We were at a museum patron party at a very wealthy patron of a museum. I was the only like dark skinned Black person there. Thurman has lighter skin, and Thurman was standing next to me when one of the people who were doing hand service of food, um, he was standing next to me, and the person came up to me and they said, "I hope that you're not Muslim because we only have pork." And Thurman looked at me, and the person walked away, and I was sort of like, I told the person, I was like, "I'm good." And Thurman looked at me and he said, "Does this always happen to you?" Because also at the same party, 4 or 5 white men came up to me, and Thurman was just like, me and Thurman just moved through the space together. And these 4 or 5 white men came up to me, and a white man looked at me and he said, "Would you like to see my t-shirt?" And I was like, "What's going on?" And he unbuttoned a polo and he opened up the polo and he had a t-shirt on that said, "Welcome to the city that we were in. Now get out." And I was like, I don't even know how to understand that t-shirt. And so Thurman had seen that happen to me. He was by my side. And when the person said, "I hope you're not Muslim because we only have pork," and I was like, "I'm good," Thurman looked at me and he said, "Does this always happen to you?" And I said, "Something's always kind of happening in an environment that's predominantly white. Like my Blackness really stands out." And Thurman said to me, he goes, "This kind of stuff doesn't happen to me." And then he started to cry. And he said, I just didn't know what it was like to move in your body as a darker skinned Black female. And then he offered to leave with me, and we left together. And that's just Thurman being Thurman and vulnerable and seeing what's happening and saying something about it. But I never forget the way that he was like, is this your reality? And I was like, sometimes it is. And he was like, well, we are going to leave this reality. We are going to go together to another place. And we left.
Mm, it's beautiful. I mean, it's not beautiful what happened, but it's beautiful that he was there for you in that moment.
Yeah. He's been there for me in like a lot of moments because we've often been like the only Black people. And I'm getting invited in as somebody from outside the glass world, and he's inside. And so, like, he has this reputation. And then I come in and I get to kind of sometimes coattail on Thurman, which is good.
Thinking about how structures can support and reinforce kinship, how do you guys develop equitable community spaces? Whether it's through your work with Art House or Better Together or other parts of your practice.
I'll start. Mine is always like to actually begin in relationships with human beings, not any institution, system, or structure at all. So this is for me about the first kind of meeting that I'll take with anybody. Like I'm not going to take my first meeting inside of an institution. I'm not going to, like, I make things very personal immediately, which makes people uncomfortable. Sometimes there's times that I've been asked, like, is this appropriate to talk about certain things? And and one of the reasons why I speak like personally and informally and intimately and about love and vulnerability and courage is because most of our community place spaces are really destroyed because the idea of community in this culture is so often splintered and fractured and has so many for me, I will speak personally, there's so many layers of violence that I feel like I have to enter into the engagement first through the technology of my heart and be in a space where I can make eye contact and be personal and begin like an experiment of community in a more intimate way. Um, and I think about how structures can support or reinforce kinship. Um, there's a lot in that question that kind of is frustrating to me because I'm really tired of being positioned as a Black person, reinforcing and retraining a lot of retraining the humanity back into whiteness or something like that, or just being like the bridge or something like that. I feel like there's a lot of structural systemic work that has to be done by white people. I feel like the center of decolonization has to be done by colonizers and people who benefit uh, to the top of the line by those structures. Um, and so, like, I'm actually really interested in weird spaces. I'm interested in strange spaces. I'm interested in spaces that stumble and figure out how to be alive. And sometimes that is just in creating a space where people feel safe enough to be vulnerable and creative at the same time, and it's living work. And for me, it's about eye contact and softness and um, vulnerability. And then, if you're in spaces with white folks who are able to take responsibility, that has to happen. Also, I experience it as something that is a living process, and since it's a living process, I feel responsible for my heart to make spaces that are compassionate and empathetic and as alive as humanly possible, which means that it's a very slow process sometimes.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that idea of just trying to be more human and more, I don't know, when I think about reinforcing this idea of kinship or developing equitable community spaces, I think about just meeting people where they're at rather than trying to mold people into what your idea of a space or an event or an institution should be. Um, when Cedric and I came up with this idea to do the first Better Together, we put out a call for entry, but it wasn't the sort of typical call for entry that you hear about, which is asking people to write a certain type of way or present their work in a certain type of way. We did request images or links to websites, but if somebody had one and not the other, that didn't mean that they were automatically out for this particular opportunity. It just meant that we had to look at them in a different light and consider what they were bringing to us, but like what this opportunity would do for them. And so I think that a lot of institutions could benefit from sort of thinking that way and creating space for people who don't already make the type of work or bring the type of thought to the table that they've already been showcasing, making space for people who make stuff that looks completely different or that doesn't come off academic, or for people who don't write extremely well or who don't have shiny portfolios.
Community, for me, that means, a group of people that care about each other and they feel like they belong together, so, putting those people in the room and creating that environment is truly special and important to me, because that's what I care about. I want to include everyone, and I want people to feel like they belong there. No matter what they look like or how different they are. We're all human and we're all different walks of life. But can we, put our our differences to the side and empower one another and celebrate one another in this one space and create this, to where we're all equal. Um, so that's like usually the special thing about the spaces that we created better together is everyone feels like they belong in that space. When I go and travel into other spaces, I want to feel like that as well, you know. Um, and sometimes I engage with some spaces and I'm with other people who are black, and they inform me that this is the first time they ever felt like that. Recently I was teaching somewhere, and then my TA pulled me to the side and was like, I feel like I'm with Barack Obama. Like nobody has ever treated me like this in this space. And I was like, that's unfortunate, but when I leave, hopefully they keep that same energy, because this is how you're supposed to feel in this space where people are talking to you and engaging with you. They shouldn't be treating you like that just because I'm around. So, me speaking with her about that situation and others and connecting her with other people in the community, who look like her, and bringing those people together so that way when I step away and I'm out of the picture, that same type of energy is still flowing through that space.
Yeah, it's like treating everybody with the same level of respect, regardless of their experience level or their skill level or their age or their, this or that. It's just like creating an even playing field for everyone and being considerate of people's backgrounds and what they're bringing to the table and what they might need in a space to feel comfortable.
Do you feel like some of the work of creating equitable community spaces and reinforcing kinship, um, do you feel like there's a space for people to bring their baggage? and the things that happen to them in other spaces, so to like clear out some of the trauma that they might have experienced in other spaces. Where, because I know when like I first was invited to Pittsburgh Glasgow Center, I was so skittish because I had been invited into so many other spaces with the advent of diversity, equity, and inclusion that, and I wasn't, and it was like not everybody in the institution had like culturally bought in to equitable spaces. It was their job. And that I would enter spaces and I'd be like, oh God, like what microaggression, like what thing is going to happen now, you know? Um, and I think about like, how do you, like, what are the first words you say at a Better Together gathering to let people know that they're okay to be skittish in the space because stuff might have happened someplace before? Like, what do you have, like an invocation, or is it just that people know enough about it now that they're like, whew, a space I can enter into and I can be, and I know I'm going to be okay in this space? Because I unfortunately feel like I have so many questions about spaces that I'm invited into sometimes that I like do this thing where I sort of tiptoe at first to see if I'm going to be okay. Do you have to do any invisible work around the trauma that people bring with them into spaces to then enter into the open field of kinship? Because some people will stand outside the gate of kinship and be like, I don't know, I could get in there and y'all could have a bull run at me or something like that, you know? And
Right.
because I've watched people keep themselves out because they just don't trust anymore. Because I'll be honest with you, when I was invited to Related Tactics at Tyler, and I was like, and I got all the information and everything, and I'm looking at my instructions from Shay.
Hey, just popping in to add some context. Vanessa is discussing a project by the artist collective Related Tactics, composed of Michelle Carlson, Nate Watson, and Weston Taruya, who were actually featured as Geeks Talk speakers in November 2021. Following their 2020 essay and New Glass review on systemic racism, exclusion, and inequity in the field of glass, Related Tactics organized a collaborative project called Disclosure: The Whiteness of Glass. RT invited artists of color to creatively translate data about the narrow demographics of the glass field through 3 iterative stages of interpretation. This started with data visualizations by RT. Artists then interpreted those visualizations and translated them to sets of creative instructions, which culminated in sculptural glass responses, which were made at the Tyler Glass program in Philly. Corey and I were part of the group that wrote instructions, along with Joyce Scott, Shay Rhodes, Einar and Hymex de la Torre, and Cheryl Darracott. Those instructions were then interpreted by Vanessa, along with Victoria Amadiza de Melendez, Helen Lee, Pearl Dick, Kim Thomas, and Rhea Friday. Okay, back to Vanessa.
Like I told Nate, I said, I think I should go home. Like, I'm not a glass artist. I don't want to take time and space from anybody else. And I feel really, really uncomfortable here. And I was like, my lip was shaking and I felt so bad. I didn't feel good in my body. I was in this new space with these new people with these expectations, and I don't blow glass. So I was going to need other artists to stop what they were doing to help me. And Nate looked at me and he said, I'm going to have to ask you to trust us, Vanessa. He said, could you please trust me? And I started to cry, and I was like, that Black man just asked me to trust him, and I'm just gonna have to go somewhere. And I didn't know, I've never had a Black man just ask me point blank to trust him, and I feel like I gotta trust him, and so I'm gonna trust him. And I cried, and I was like, I was like, since you asked, I trust you. But it was hard. Like, it was even hard to say that I didn't feel comfortable in a space that was actually crafted for me to feel comfortable in.
Mm. Yeah, that's important. And we try to, like, we did a Better Together recently at Pilchuck Glass School in Washington. And we're new to this. Cedric and I, we've done several, 3, 4 Better Togethers now, but they keep growing and changing, and everyone's a little bit different. and each one picks up, new members, and there's more and more people who are pulled into this thing every time. And so, do we have like a protocol for that sort of thing? Not really, but we try to be considerate. When we met at Pilchuck, the first thing we did was we gathered together in the library, and we sat around this table and looked at each other, and we just talked for a long while before we even set foot in a studio, because I knew that we had invited some people that were, at varying levels in their career. We had Thurman Statham there, who has, been there longer than any of us. And then we had, Arthur Wilson and Terry Sigley, these people who are amazing artists in their own right, but who have been doing this for less time. And so, probably along with bringing the type of baggage and trauma that you're referring to, have the sort of imposter syndrome that they're trying to combat as well. Like, am I supposed to be in this space, in this room? Is this for me? Do I have anything to offer here? And the first thing I wanted to make sure everybody knew was that this wasn't for anybody but them and for us. This wasn't for Pilchuck Glass School. This wasn't for the greater glass community. This was for these artists in this room to come together and to share ideas and to bond and to make work. And there was not going to be any focus on object. We weren't here to like make the biggest, best piece we'd ever made. If we didn't make a goddamn thing all week and all we did was sat in that library and talk, like, that would have been an amazing experience. Um, and so it is important to me to try and sort of like set that expectation early on, that you don't have to be anything other than what you are. What you are is perfect, and what you have to offer is enough. And let's go from there.
I feel like that's so healing, because that is actually contrary to the cultural message that we receive. The cultural message I feel that like is broadly available is that you're actually not okay where you are and how you are. But here are 4 things you can buy, 3 schools that you can go to, like a process that you can do to like shape shift yourself into something that, okay, now you're okay to be here. Um, and I appreciate, well, what I want to say is, I think it's really wise. It's wise in like a vast way to always speak that really original truth that we're here to be together, and you being exactly who you are is exactly right.
Mm. Yeah, we don't get told that enough. And that's what makes people feel left out, or like they can't even begin to enter a space. They think they're not enough or they're not right. And yeah, we don't hear that enough.
I haven't had the opportunity to buy a continuous melt furnace, but I figured that I might ask someone who has had the pleasure of working with wet dog glass. And so I thought I would ask you, Helen.
So outside of my role as the director of GEEX, I'm the head of the glass lab at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I first got here in 2013, and one of the very first things I sought out was to upgrade our furnace. I immediately got on Wet Dog's radar. Eddie and his team came up and installed our 700-pound continuous melt electric furnace. Our furnace has really been the workhorse of our studio for roughly the past decade, and it's still totally mint. And it's kind of phenomenal to realize that all the hot work that's come out of the UW Glass Lab over roughly the past decade has come from this furnace. The shop dog access and being able to look into the furnace remotely has really just alleviated, a lot of concerns and granted a lot of peace of mind. I always tell people like, oh God, having a furnace is like having a baby. But being able to see into what is going on at the furnace from afar has been like just a super crucial and useful tool, and has also enabled a lot of delegation in terms of working with technicians and tech support and not having to feel like it's all on my shoulders. They had also they had made a stop motion video of their install and like snuck in a frame. It was like a sign that said "Hi Helen" or something like that. I gotta look that up because it's been a while. Their team was just so fun, and so swift and competent in terms of just like rolling in here, having 3 days to assemble this like giant ass piece of complicated equipment. But it was really seamless and super fun to work with them.
Wet Dog Glass is your studio's best friend. Learn more at wdg-us.com.
How does this work integrate backwards into education and glass as well? And how do we reshape the educational environments where glass is learned? Have you all thought about that? Have you put like a lot of thought into like how do we reshape the environment where young black artists, you young BIPOC artists are coming to actually learn the thing that you know? What would you change about the ways that you learned or the environments you learned in?
I would say like ensuring a high level of comfort for people who are entering that space, for them to be comfortable. That's first and foremost.
What does that look like? What are ingredients of comfort, Cedric? What are ingredients of comfort?
Um, I I let them know that they're okay, and like we're not here to judge anyone. We're all here to learn, and we're all, if we're beginners, we're beginners, or if wherever we are, we're here to learn, and we're not trying to judge our success in this environment or this class or learning environment off someone else's success. What I've learned is treating different people differently and trying to understand them from where they're at. We're all dealing with something, so I try to like connect with them on the level to let them know that everything's okay. We're just here to learn. When you're teaching, you have to learn like how to connect with human beings. Everybody doesn't learn at the same pace or the same level. Some people might need a little bit more time, or some people just might not be, they're just dealing with something, some other issue, you know? So you might have to connect with them on that level, which I've had happen plenty of times.
Do you ever find, like, I find that when I was first working with my neighbors on my front porch, that the kids were obsessed with perfection and they would want to just toss out paper and just want to get rid of stuff because it wasn't perfect. Do you find that in educational environments, you have to talk specifically, or have you shaped a way to talk about what a mistake is and how you learn from mistakes and how beautiful mistakes are? And like, so that people do not either feel shamed by mistakes or like are very harsh with themselves about being in the nature of being a beginner. Because I feel like I was always surprised how emotional young people would get in some environments that I would be a teaching artist in around not perfection. Like it was
Mm,
very painful to them to not have a drawing be like exactly what they saw in their mind. And it was painful for them to look around the room and be like, that's better than mine. And they had this sort of automatic experience of competition.
mm.
How do you, especially for glass, like, I definitely have cried when things, I'm an emotional person, but like I cry when stuff breaks in the hot shop or when I
Yeah.
do. And everybody around me is so easy about it, and like we worked on this huge piece for related tactics and it just got a little bit too cold. And it was like hours of work and it was just gone. And I cried, and everybody else was high fiving themselves and hugging. And they were like, man, look what we did. And I was like, but it's gone. It's gone. And so, like, how do you hold the different cultural reckoning with learning and mistake making?
I can definitely relate to that. I've had a student just start crying while heating a piece, and I had to ask what was wrong, and her answer was, "I've never not been good at anything." So coming up with a like rallying together and figuring out a way to like relate to this person. Um, and to uplift them and empower them was, make it a game. So I made it a game of making a cup, so where we all felt connected. So we all did a part of the cup, to bring her up and boost her confidence level up. So we're a team and we're acting as a team. Um, and just and celebrating those mistakes, because we're always trying to chase perfection and all that, and then the crazy thing about chasing perfection, you get so far in your career as a glass artist and you make these perfect things, and then you realize that people want organic things and they celebrate those things. Like I had a project where a guy wanted me to make everything look like seconds. He didn't want it to look perfect. He wanted them to all be unique. And that was his like method of selling, was like, I want the person to come into this store and pick the glass that connects with them. I don't want them all the same. I want them to be different so they can feel like they had connectivity with this, which the one that speaks to them. And it was pretty interesting concept. It took me a while to understand, celebrating the unique qualities of, whatever you're making. And a lot of artists, like Basquiat, everything he made was just organic and just, it's free. It's a freeing thing. So if you can like lean into that a little bit and celebrate those differences, and you can discover like your identity within that design or within that art, and then develop it a little bit more instead of like chasing perfection. We spend too much time chasing this idea of perfection, which doesn't exist, and it tends to drive you crazy, especially me. So just letting go. And then that's another thing, like with glass, which I've learned, is detachment, you know, and when things break, just, detaching myself from it, which helped me in life, because in life I've experienced so many traumatic experiences, which kind of related to like life, and it being hard. Glass blowing is hard, life is hard. And to just, detach from a little bit, from life a little bit, and learn how to love people, without being like so attached and things like that. So it's really helped me a lot in just learning how to be like more human and to celebrate the uniqueness of everything that is being made, even though I throw a lot of things away that's not perfect. And now I keep them so I can look at them and learn from them.
Thank you.
I agree with that idea that there's this overemphasis on perfection uh, and completed object, and I think I, I I've tried in my own teaching to try and sort of move away from that by focusing on experiences over object, especially when we're talking about beginning glass blowing. I mean, you can take a beginning glass blowing class for a whole year before you make something that you know anybody might spend $1 on. And so I've been teaching this workshop where uh, it's a beginning class, and we're looking at glass through the lens of the tablescape, making drinkware, tableware, cups, bowls, plates, vases, serving vessels, because that's the sort of glass that I like to make. But rather than focusing on like, okay, this cup isn't exactly the right proportions or shape, or the sidewall's not straight, what we're working towards is a collaborative tablescape that we're going to use to have a meal from at the end of the class. Cedric and I have been teaching this class together. We taught one at Penland, and there's these really intense highs and lows when people are just like ready to give up, and they hate the things that they've made, or like you said, something hit the floor and they literally cry about it. But then all of that melts away when they see the table that they've made together, and then we share a meal off of those wares, and they realize the power of collaboration. And and they realize that like the thing that has been so amazing about the last 2 weeks has not been the straightness of the cups that they've been making, but it's been the connection to the people that they've been working with, because of that thing we're talking about with glass blowing earlier, where it's like you get these really strong, quick bonds. And then we share this meal at the end that just like tricks them into forgetting all of the the hardship that they've faced over the last couple of weeks trying to figure out how to keep a bubble on center, and now all they can think about is like how much better this wine tastes out of this janky ass cup that I made, because I made it with all of these people here who saw me struggle, um, and so that's just one example, but I think if we can, in education and in institutions of cultural preservation, museums, galleries, focus less on objects and technical prowess and more on uh, experience and community engagement. And I think we're starting to see a tendency toward that, but I think that that could do a lot for creating more equitable spaces. That's one side of it for me. The other side that we're sort of talking around here is this idea of representation. And I think that it's a lot easier for people to see themselves in spaces or roles that they might aspire towards, if there are people already in those spaces and roles who look like them. If you are trying to learn this thing, and you're a young Black artist and there's just nobody who looks like you might think, then this isn't for me. Or you might not have ever even heard of that thing. It's like you could take it back even further. There's this idea of representation, but then there's also like awareness to these opportunities. Um, and uh, why are there not so many Black glass artists? Well, because we don't know that that's even an option for us. That we haven't seen people who look like us in those positions, and our parents certainly haven't heard of a successful Black glass artist before, and it's rare for somebody to get support from their family if there's not like something they can point to as an example of like how a successful outcome might look. So yeah, those are the two things I think about, is this idea of moving away from perfection and towards experience, and uh, ensuring that all sorts of people are represented in education and higher learning.
It's really important to me what you said about emphasizing experience, and emphasizing experience centering like relationship and togetherness. And it also brings me back to this place about kinship, and how I said like the it's like hyper intimate kinship, and in that way that you can invite people into an experience with themselves. Like, what is success for you? How do you want to be in relationship with this space and with other human beings in this space? um, and inviting people into that, a really intentional relationship with their kinship with themselves in that space, and how they want to have an experience. I am like self taught, community taught, mother taught, soul taught, and I visit a lot of college and university campuses in my practice, and there's always this time. And a lot of times it's like a beginning studio art class where the students are competing with each other and competing with me. A lot of times it's like beginning students, like performing what it is to be an artist, or performing what it is to have performing their ideas. And there's a kind of like competition ambition stack that sort of can happen. And sometimes it's been very intense, where students fight and they have to call the class off, or people hurt each other in critiques. And there's, I think, parts of, I have this other friend, I don't know if you know, like the curator Eric Shiner, but Eric, when people talk to him about studying, he asks them why they want to do that. And it's interesting that people say that they will get like better positions or be able to make more money, but it's not, there's not a sort of centering on the fact that you are experiencing your life at the same time. Like, you are alive in this educational environment, you are having a whole human living experience, you are developing relationship skills, all of these other things are happening. And how do we like, I always just want to invite more wholeness into spaces, but I do recognize we live in a culture where it has been really dangerous for people like you, Corey, and Cedric, and myself to seek to expand wholeness in spaces. Like, it has been dangerous for us. And so for me, the educational environment is only strengthened by inviting every human being to be as whole as possible in that. And that means inviting them to be intentional about experience. And I feel like it's more important than, like, I have not thought about it that way before, like you said, but I I wonder what, I think it's something that you're doing, that you both do. And I find sometimes that there's like rigidity in academic environments. There's a lot of rigidity around the shapes that people can occupy, people's roles. And then there's all this protection around roles and around like shape and permission and authority and agency, that I experienced to be quite painful. Um, I feel like there are shape shifted environments of instruction and experiential learning that exist. And a lot of them are just indigenous, really.
We took a little break here, and Corey stepped away for a moment. What follows is an excerpt from a conversation with Vanessa and Cedric.
Hey, Cedric, can I ask you a question? Are you frozen?
Yeah,
Are
for
you
sure.
by any chance, are you by any chance in love?
Yeah, I'm in love.
Will you tell me about it? You can, as generally or whatever as you want.
Yeah, so I'm actually engaged. I'm gonna get married next year.
I love love. Oh my God. How did you propose? Who proposed?
Who proposed? I proposed. um, I proposed at the Golden Gate Bridge in May.
Oh my God.
Me and my
Were
fiance
you
have.
scared?
No, I wasn't scared. I mean,
Had you already talked about marriage?
yeah, we talked about marriage, and some of the conversations went well. Some of them didn't. Um, Only because of just you know growing up and not having an example of like a successful marriage. Like my dad was in prison probably like 30 years out of my 36 years of me being on earth. And my mom's been a single parent, all my life. And it wasn't really like a lot of examples in the home of like like a father figure or a husband or how to be that. So just learning how to be and become that. So when I first met my fiance, um, I wanted to do something different, and that was what does love mean? So it was like a journey of like discovering what love means to different people. So asking people, that question like, what does love mean? And what I came up with is, it's something that you become. So you become love, and you find love in the beauty and all the things around you, and just become loving. being. And asking those questions to people was pretty interesting. You know, I asked my grandma, didn't get the answer that I expected at all.
So do you feel like your grandmother has been loved?
I feel like the love that she experienced maybe came from family, you know, like her grandchildren, her children, and being a loving like grandmother to us. It just brought up so many other questions in this journey of like when people talk about old school love and all that, and you're like, what does that even mean? Like, what's that like?
Wait, really quick. I wanna know something because you said when I met my fiance. When you met them, they weren't your fiance. So
No,
did you know? Like, did you have an experience? Because my brother got married in the pandemic, and he said he knew when he saw her. He was like, "Oh my god, like this is the woman I'm going to marry." Like, did you have an experience like that, or did you all become each other's through the relationship? Like, did you
it
have a
was
really
both.
special feeling?
The first conversation,
It was love from the first conversation?
I told her I was like, "You're gonna be my future wife." So it's
Yeah.
kind of like knowing without really knowing. You like, this is it, you know, and then leaning into love and then realizing that, you know, fear and love can't exist in the same space. So eliminating fear of like, oh, what if and all this and just leaning into it. So like we went on the first date.
Wait, really quickly, you can't brush by that. Were your what ifs about your capacity to love? Or were your ifs fear-based? Were your what ifs like, what if she cheats on me? What if this? Or was it like, did you have the capacity to love?
I felt like I was in a space right then where I was in a capacity to love. Like I've been through enough things in life that I was just ready to like lean into love and let go of fear of like what ifs, like eliminate that because it's things that I haven't even experienced yet. So it's an experience that I have to go through in order to feel it. So I was willing to go through all those things to discover that love.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
No problem.
I really
I'm here.
appreciate it. I feel like I really celebrate y'all and that you have like really lifted up my heart in a way. Cedric, thank you for sharing personally about love and the questions like that journey that you went on to discover about love. I feel like that's something that I kind of had to do in a way to save my own life. And I think it's really beautiful that you're able to share openly about that because I haven't actually talked to a Black man about love like that ever. And I don't know what made me ask you if you were in love. I think it's because I'm in love and I'm just want to talk about love. But I really appreciate that. And I celebrate your lives. I celebrate your loves. I celebrate your friendship that you have with each other. And I hope that your friendship is like a model for people that you can have a friendship like you two have where you create in the world in a way.
Do y'all see definitions between art, activism, and acts of wellness? When I hear this question, I sort of think in terms of definition, like lines. Are there divisions almost between these things, or do you sort of see them intertwined or feeding off of one another? Can you talk about that?
We're in the structure of a civilization that separates everything. And I feel like white supremacy relies on separation. And so I resist definitive singular spaces for art, activism, and acts of wellness as an act of restorative justice to my soul and as a radical centering of wholeness. and recognizing also that it is really new in the human timeline to separate art activism and acts of wellness. That's a new thing. Who does it serve? Who's served by separating art activism and acts of wellness? What does that serve? We are served by connection. We know science tells us, like neuroscience talks about, like what happens to your brain and your nervous system when you are creating. Like you heal faster if you create in togetherness. Like there's so much science behind the the wholeness of these spaces.
Yeah, I feel like when we start to create those divisions, that's when these things start to feel like chores. When the activism is a side piece to your daily practice, or that active wellness is something that you have to squeeze in the little bit
Mm,
of time that you might have left at the end of the day, rather than considering those things as just like part of your life. And furthermore, there's, like you were saying, it's a product of this ugly supremacist sort of society that is just, we don't need to be a part of anymore. It's like this, there's so much emphasis, especially as artists, placed on achieving, having our heads down in the studio and like trying to get to the next thing, the next big show, the next line on the resume. And it's crippling, it's stifling, it makes us and them. Whereas if we could just focus more on integrating activist work or acts of wellness into our daily practice, they would energize us rather than deplete our energy source.
Especially like watching Vanessa's talk, that was felt like they were all connected, in her work and what she does. And then same with Corey and his work and his pain practice. Um, I'm more of a object maker, but you know, the other work is with connecting with the people and teaching or having these events where we're bringing these people together. Like I said again, it's all connected. I don't feel like these things need to be separated into different categories or anything like that.
And you say, Cedric, that you're an object maker, but I know you personally, and I know that you've decided that you're going to make more time for these other things that give you life. You're spending less time in the studio making objects so that you can focus more on planning the next year of Better Together events. I mean, is that true for you, that these things you're learning are just as important to you as all of that other stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Thank you for correcting me. Uh, yes, I mean that is what really gives me joy. Connecting with people on those levels and being a reference point. That's sort of like activism as well, showing up and being this figure, you know, that wasn't there when I first started. Um,
mm.
so that's mainly the reason why I even stayed with it and chose this career path. So it's a longer game, but it's something that is needed. It was needed. I was needed. We were needed for us to show other people that they could do um, things that's out of the norm that we were shown in our communities. It just feels good.
It's so beautiful. I could feel it inside of me when you said we were needed. Did you hear yourself say that, Cedric? We were needed.
Yeah, I mean it's absolutely right. We were needed, and even us being in this space right now, talking to each other and connecting with each other, and learning from each other, like it's special for me. Every time I hear somebody talk, I get emotional. Like I'm gonna cry. I'm a crier.
You could cry.
I remember being in the street after Mike Brown was killed. I remember what it was like to be a part of Black Lives Matter. when it first started. And I remember being in the movement. So I'm opening this up from my experience and how competitive it was in the movement, how people wanted to be the person on the cover of the newspaper with their fist up, or they would get mad if somebody else had the megaphone or was getting attention as an activist in a certain way. And people were hurting each other actively in my experience from where I was at that time. And what happened that shifted for me uh, and and increased my insistence on dissolving boundaries between spaces was when the young woman made the call in August of, I think, 2016 for people to come to Standing Rock. And she was like, just come and be on the land with us. And I was like, wait, I don't have to like bring my protest gear. I don't have to bring a megaphone. Like the protest is me being myself on the land. That's the thing itself. That is the act of wellness. That is the activism. That is the work of art, to be in community, myself with you, just there. That's all I have to do is go sit with you by a fire and eat, and we talk and walk around. No, I was like, I'm there. I drove 2,000 miles when she made that message, And when I got to Standing Rock, I was one of, 3 Black people on the land. And people would come up to me and they didn't say, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Or like, there's not a lot of Black people here. But what the Native people would say to me, the question they would ask is, how far did you come? And I would say, I drove 1,900 miles. And they say, you came a long way to be here with us. Thank you. And it was the first time I experienced being the thing itself just by being myself. And so that shifted how I thought about protest activism, like what I do with my body, because I figured the truest form of activism that I could engage in is actually love and love out loud. And then that caused me to investigate ways that love is lived, how I live love through my body, through my life, and what it means to be openly, actively loving in this culture. Because I couldn't find any other form of protest, disruption, or like occupying space that was more active and profound and more violent to the lie of separation than actively loving myself and other human beings in any given space. So, why reinforce any boundary or separation between art, activism, and active wellness? Because the ultimate activism is towards a living justice. And yes, we do have to put language to what a living justice is in relationship to the history of this experience on this land. But ultimately, and also just to not be in exhaustive pursuit your whole life. I'm always fighting. I'm always doing this. Like, what if you just being Cedric, where Cedric is, loving where Cedric is, crying when Cedric wants to cry, inviting people in when Cedric is ready to invite people in, loving Corey, saying so out loud? What if that is everything? And it happens to be that what you're sharing is glass and glass blowing and some food and some space, and you not saying, okay, now we're going to go take over the freeway, because you have taken over the space of your own life and your own imagination. You've actually retrieved yourself from separation. And I I think that there is just a tremendous space of opportunity to resist boundaries around, to resist these sort of spaces of separation in so many parts of our lives, but also deeply internally, right? For me, that is something that I seek to do. Like, I honestly will tell you, like, I'm a human romantic, and I desire I honestly do desire to love everyone in every space that I'm in, and to love myself and to allow myself the space to be kind in every space that I'm in, and to be warm and to be heart centered in every space that I'm in. And I know, because I'm heart centered, that means that I respect the boundaries that of for my own being. Not that it's like it is something that um, is something that I'm also always becoming inside of. But what better form of wellness is there than to be deeply involved in that which you love the most creatively, and then to share that and to offer experience into that for people who feel disconnected or connected to it already. I don't know what I was doing sometimes when I was in the street. I don't actually know what I thought the goal was, but I had to reckon with that in a real way. There are so many spaces to be created for our future selves to inhabit without any boundary or separation between what wellness is, activism is, and art, because the ultimate art is happening at the scale of your entire existence, your entire life. Thanks for letting me figure that out.
That was good.
I aspire to do what you talk about and make art in that on that on that scale.
But you do realize that you are, right? You do realize that you are both social sculptors in a way, that you are working at the scale of life, you are working at the scale of community within the infinite technologies of the heart. Like anytime you intentionally bring people together to create, you do realize how powerful that is, and that that was like the tenet of our indigenous cultures. You cooked together, you created together, you gathered materials together, and you so easily, seamlessly, for the lungs of the community, shared what you knew. You didn't hoard what you knew. And you couldn't hoard what you know, because hoarding, being greedy with your wisdom and being greedy with your heart, means that the community suffocates and starves to death. So you are operating as on the grand scale of social sculpture, like you're creating a world that is a work of art.
I need to talk to you every day.
Want to go to Church of Vanessa.
For real.
Well,
I need that
I
morning.
want to tell you something. Like, one of the things that I'm gifted at is reflecting back to people what they are. Like, all I'm saying to you is like, this is what you're doing. This is who you are. This is what's happening. And now you can take, if you feel anything of what I say, how will you move more intentionally then? Like, what will shift for you knowing that you are doing the grand work of social healing, social sculpture, and also deep restoration to what is really truly indigenous and original to us as human beings? That's what you're doing. You're returning the circle. That's what you're doing, which means also, let's be honest, that you were called to do it. Because not everybody is returning the circle. Not every glass blower you know, not every artist you know is making the connection and gathering human beings into circle, into spiral the way that you are, which means you are divinely equipped to do what you're doing. So, how then do you recognize other circle keepers when you bring people together? Are you recognizing in young people the carrying capacity to restore the circle? And are you speaking that into them and saying, hey, I see this in you. you know? And are you looking at what ingredients of love you're working with? Because recognize that you are doing things that other people could be doing, but they are not.
Or could be doing, but don't do it as well.
Yeah, that's true. Some people do it and they cause harm, right? And they do it, and maybe it's performative, maybe it's for the grant or whatever. Um, so I say that just like deeply encouraging all the work that you do in your life, because it's so clear to me that I this might just sound whatever. It's so clear to me that you're chosen to do the work that you do, because you're also doing it at this time. Look at how divisive the world is right now. Look at what you're doing at this time, at this place. And look how well you do it. Look how doors open up for you and people call you and they ask you to do it in different places, which means you're protected in the journey also, because you need to be protected in the journey that you're on. So I thank you all so much. You're so beautiful. And um, I just really want to work with you all one day. I kind of want to be in community with you. I want to be close to where you are.
Oh, same, girl, same. What you're saying resonates with me so much. It's just somebody said, I don't know who said this to me, but somebody said to me once that they teach because they're good at it, and they teach because they feel an obligation to, because there's so many people out there who do it and aren't good at it and are teaching the wrong things to the right people. And um, I don't know. I feel that way about this work sometimes, where sometimes, on most days it does energize me and it does feed me, but on other days, and I know Seg can relate to this, it's hard and there's not time for it, but like we have to do it because we're we're good at it. It's like you said, we were chosen to do it in a way, and not to sound any type of way, but yeah, that resonates with me.
To speak into the dream space, I would really love to work with you too. I'd really love to create together and share space together. I think that would be a great next step. I look forward to that.
Same. We can definitely make that happen. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was like crying on the inside thinking about how I want to hug Vanessa.
I'll be in LA in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks? All right, hit us up.
Stay tuned for closing thoughts from Vanessa, Corey, and Cedric. To learn more about upcoming exhibitions, follow Vanessa at Vanessa L. German on Instagram. Follow Better Together at bettertogether_CTF or crafting_the_future to find upcoming Better Together events. Corey Pemberton is at Instant Classic, and Cedric Mitchell is at Cedric Mitchell Design. The Geeks Talks Q&A is edited and produced by Emily Leach, that's me, and Ben Orozco. Our theme is Refraction by Poddington Bear, with additional music from Otis McDonald. A huge thank you to Geeks Talk subscribers for your continued support and engagement. Your questions shape this conversation. They're available on the show notes on our website, where you can listen to all of our episodes and all 3 seasons of the Geeks Talks lecture series. Make sure to share questions for speakers via email to questions@geeks.glass. Learn more about subscribing to Geeks Talks on our website, geeks.glass/support. If you haven't subscribed to Geeks Talks yet, there's a 3-month public access period. Visit the Geeks Glass YouTube channel to listen and enjoy Better Together and Vanessa German's lectures before they're archived on December 19th, 2022 and January 23rd, 2023. We have a shop where you'll soon be able to purchase merch inspired by each Geeks Talks lecture. Proceeds will support speakers along with our work. Thanks to our sponsors this episode. In business since 1996, Wet Dog Glass delivers unsurpassed value and turnkey hot glass studio equipment, studio planning and consultation, and technical support. Wet Dog Glass, your studio's best friend. Learn more at wdg-us.com. Pittsburgh Glass Center cultivates an inclusive and welcoming environment that encourages everyone, from the casually curious to the master artist, to learn, create, and be inspired by glass. PGC shares their passion for glass locally and globally to advance a more diverse, vibrant, and accessible glass art community. In her GEEX Talks lecture, Vanessa spoke extensively about her experience at PGC's Idea Furnace residency program. I would highly encourage you to watch the lecture and learn more about PGC at pittsburghglasscenter.org. The GEEX Talks Q&A podcast is supported by a Craft Research Fund grant from the Center for Craft. The Craft Research Fund is a visionary program dedicated to supporting scholarly craft research in the United States. Center for Craft supports work by academic and artist researchers, independent scholars, curators, and graduate students, writing, revising, and reclaiming the history of craft. Thanks so much for helping GEEX offer more histories and establish new legacies in the field of glass. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the GEEX Talks Q&A podcast and share with a friend. Stay tuned for 2 more episodes this season: Migration, Boundaries, and Belonging, Oppositional Histories on Glass and Race is coming in February 2023, and Reframing Antiquity, Ways of Knowing and Being in May. For updates on GEEX, sign up for our newsletter. You can also follow us at GEEX Glass on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
For any artist who feels alone or disconnected or without community, your community is waiting for you, and you will find your people, and you will be able to have connection as you desire that. Your work is important. It's important to the world. You're important also. So I'm grateful to the artists, and I'm grateful to teachers. And I believe that we are making a future where we can all be whole and loving and courageous and safe at the same time.
I just want to echo that and share a little anecdote about a moment that sort of cemented me in my decision to be an artist. I took a workshop with a painter called Holly Roberts, and this was after focusing really intensely on glass blowing for maybe 10 years or so and wanting to return to painting. And I had zero confidence in myself as a painter. I had instructors in college who told me that I couldn't paint, in fact, and that's actually part of why I switched to glass. Was I had a professor who told me I didn't have what it took to make it in the communication arts program, and so that really stuck with me. And I was struggling, and I couldn't bring myself to even finish a painting. And this instructor of mine, Holly Roberts, she said to me that I just need to trust myself, and that there's so much value in my style, and that I'm an amazing painter. I just need to believe that, and that I need to let go of this idea of trying to be like somebody else and just trust myself. And so I want to put that same energy back out into the world and hope that other people can hear that and trust themselves.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm grateful for all of you guys and being here. What I would say is, just step out of the space of fear and just lean into love, and, leave people better than you found them. That's it.
Campsite.
For real.
Thanks so much to Cedric, Corey, and Vanessa. I'm really excited to see what grows from this conversation, and so grateful for all that you shared. Coming in February 2023, Migration, Boundaries, and Belonging, Oppositional Histories on Glass and Race, featuring Dr. Carrie Sinanan and King Cobra, documented as Doreen Garner.